If you're a perfectionist, wait, we already did that in the Bastion video. Basically, here's everything I know about the trial chambers, how they generate, how the trial spawners work, and some other tips and tricks. The trial chambers generate between Y level -40 and 20 in the underground in the overworld. The majority of the structure generates between -20 and 0, so digging in Y level -20 is ideal for finding one. There are two methods of finding a trial chamber. The first method is finding a cartographer villager, or finding an unemployed villager and giving him a cartography table to give him the profession. Giving him 2 stacks of paper and later on glass panes from 30 glass will level him up to journeyman, where he will sell a trial explorer map for a compass and up to 12 emeralds. The second method only works in single player and is using the pie chart or profiler chart as it's known in-game. Open up your debug menu by pressing F3. Now, if you press F3 and 1, a pie chart will show up in the bottom right. And if you have a function key, press Function F3 and 1. The shortcut does not use the numerical keypad. F3 and 1 are close to each other and are best friends. Also, this used to be Shift and F3, but that got changed in 1.20.2 in September 2023. Now every time you open up the F3 menu, the pie chart will stay there until you hit F3 and 1 to disable it. It also shows if it's enabled or not. You can navigate the pie chart by using the numbers on your keyboard. 0 is when you want to go back, and the numbers are what you choose. For trial chambers, if you are at root, we choose tick, level, and block entities. If you see trial spawner and or vault, then there is a trial chamber within your render distance. Usually, vault is red and trial spawner is dark violet. To find it, lower your render distance so that you can't see the trial spawner or vault. The fastest way to do this is lowering your render distance by half. Close and reopen the F3 menu to refresh the pie chart when you want something disappear. Now increase your render distance by 1 and see if anything reappears again. If not, keep incrementing the render distance by 1 until you see a trial spawner or vault. Once you do, set your render distance to 1 lower than your current one. Once you have that, refresh your pie chart and press F3 and G to show chunk borders. Now cross a chunk and see if anything pops up in the pie chart. If not, go back and try a different chunk. Once you see it change, then that is your direction to find your trial spawner. But how far is it? The answer is your render distance right now. That is how many chunks you'll have to go. Now in multiplayer, this works partially because you cannot increase or decrease your render distance, so it's much harder to do with this second method. If you don't like using this method, you can always use the first method with the villager. Once you get there, you can check with your pie chart again, because sometimes it can be diagonally from you and not in a straight line. If the trial spawner or vault doesn't disappear, then you are within 2 chunks to it. In my case, when I cross this chunk border, no trial spawner appears, but when I cross it, it appears again. This means I'm exactly 2 chunks away from it. If you decide to explore, you can dig straight down if you want to be risky, otherwise stand between 2 blocks, dig one side 3 blocks down or so, and then mine the other side and repeat until you hit your Y level. We'll go with Y level -20. And if you use the second method and didn't find anything, chances are that it's still near. You can help yourself with F3 and G to show chunks and mine straight towards a chunk. If there's nothing, change directions and mine towards a different chunk. If you hear sounds that trial spawners emit, or you can see trial spawner crackles in the subtitles, you have successfully found a trial chamber. So we know how to find the trial chamber. What about the structure itself? Well, it's composed of 4 main components: hallways, corridors, intersections, and chambers. This sounds confusing at first, but let me visually show you. First, the structure generates with an entrance. They may contain either an oak tree, mangrove tree, or a cactus. There are 3 variations. This one I call ventilation. It has 2 starter chests which contain this loot. It has a vault at the top requiring a trial key. They always generate with copper blocks and slabs like this. Below, you can use the staircase or use a trapdoor next to the tree that serves as a ventilation shaft. There's an exit to the left, but there's also a dead end with a 1-block gap created by a copper grate. There, you will find a chest that contains much better loot than those 2 chests above. You can also mine next to the tree to access the chest. Next we have the staircase. This one does not contain a tree. There are 3 starter chests and 2 vaults. The fastest way to get them is to dig through here, where the entrance is, and below here. And lastly, we have whatever this is. It might be a small letter F or a small letter T. I honestly don't know. Anyway, if you go upstairs, you'll find a vault and 2 starter chests. The entrance will always lead to the atrium, which has a fountain in the center and 2 murals on each side. There's also an ominous vault above the entrance, requiring an ominous trial key. It's made out of tough blocks, oxidized copper grates, and red glazed terracotta, which are the eyes from the various omen effects. We'll get to ominous events later on in the video. Beyond the atrium, we have our first corridor. It has 3 floors, and on each floor there are 4 potential entrances to hallways on each side. If it has a copper frame, then it's an entrance. The hallways either lead to a dead end, a chest with loot, or a combat chamber. But watch out, the hallways aren't always safe. Sometimes there will be stalagmites. Very rarely you can come across a supply chest, and the supply chest has one of the worst loot you can get in the entire structure. The hallways can sometimes contain encounters. These are small challenges you have to beat before you can get to the main chamber or chest. Currently, they are very rare, which is considered a bug because they're supposed to be common. Every time a bug report has been mentioned in this video, it's going to be linked in the video description. Back to the corridor. It can also generate with trial spawners ranging from 0 to 4 spawners on the first and second floor, most commonly on the second one. On the third floor only, skeleton spawners can generate. Sometimes a vault can also generate on the second or third floor. For the second floor, you can tell if a vault has generated by seeing 2 chiseled tuff on the wall. You can get to it by mining through the wall. At the end of the corridor, there is a T intersection, so it will always branch out into 2 paths, and there are 3 different intersections. The first intersection is the room. It will generate with a staircase leading to a barrel with 4 beds plus a lonely bed behind this wall. There's always 3 string inside the pot, so if you want to, and you're early in the game, you can craft yourself a bow. When entering from the corridor, there is a guaranteed combat chamber to the right with an ominous vault before the entrance, and another corridor to the left. The second intersection is the aquarium. It generates with a ladder that leads to 4 beds without a barrel this time, and a hidden ominous vault behind the wall. When entering from the corridor by climbing up a ladder, there's a guaranteed combat chamber to the left this time, and another corridor to the right. And apparently I can be wrong as well. Sometimes, instead of a chamber, it can rarely generate into a dead end or a chest. So apparently I can be wrong, but like 99 times out of 100, it will lead to a chamber, but to a chest, that usually never happens. The last intersection is the drop. On the right side of the drop is a platform that has one barrel with 3 beds. If you go further down and you face the way you entered the intersection, then you'll have another corridor to the left and a copper grate wall behind you that leads to a combat chamber. And in this one there is no ominous vault. The second corridor is exactly the same as the first one, but instead of an atrium, we have an end to the corridor in the form of a staircase. And there are 2 possible ways it can generate. There's one with water that has a chest behind the stairs and has this loot. This is the only chest that has a loot table that contains amethyst shards. And on the opposite of the chest, there's an ominous vault. There's also a regular vault at the very top of the staircase. And there's one without water that has a double staircase and an ominous vault at the very top. Both of the staircase will lead to a combat chamber. And that's how trial chambers generate. So if you ever get stuck and find yourself in a corridor, you can with no problem travel to the entrance or to a place you haven't explored yet. So in general, you will always encounter 2 or more combat chambers. Before we go in depth to each combat chamber, let's talk about how trial spawners work. A trial spawner activates if it has a line of sight of the player within 14 blocks and starts spawning a wave of mobs. Once all the mobs are defeated, the trial spawner deactivates for 30 minutes until it becomes active again. There are 4 types of trial spawners: a breeze spawner, melee spawner, small melee spawner, and range spawner. The breeze spawner is a standalone spawner. It spawns 2 breezes in total, and only one can exist simultaneously. The melee spawner is composed of 3 mobs: zombie, husk, and spider. The small melee spawner is composed of 4 mobs: cave spider, silverfish, slime, and baby zombie. And the range spawner is composed of 3 mobs: skeleton, stray, and bogged. The last 3 spawners mentioned spawn 6 mobs in total, 1 every second, and only 3 can exist at the same time, the exception being baby zombies, where there's 2 instead of 3. There's a special type of spawner called the slow-ranged spawner, which has different values. The most notable being that it spawns 1 mob every 8 seconds, and is only found in Chamber 8, and also in Encounter 4. If you play in multiplayer, then depending on how many players fight, the total mobs added per player and simultaneous mobs added per player changes accordingly. Each trial chamber randomly chooses between these mobs in each spawner category and uses it as the spawner type for the entire structure. So if you see a trial spawner that spawns regular spiders, you will not have any zombies or husks. And this applies to all trial spawners except for breeze, of course. If you drink an ominous bottle and have the bad omen effect, once you have a line of sight with the spawner, it will convert into an ominous trial spawner, which spawns tougher enemies. If the spawner was on cooldown and not ominous, the cooldown is skipped and becomes active again. An ominous trial spawner has these changes compared to a normal one. And for each chamber, the trial spawner picks a random set of 2 projectiles to spawn above the player or above the mob. The first projectile is a lingering potion: wind charged, oozing, weaving, infested, strength, speed, and slow falling. The second projectile is an arrow or charge, so arrow, poison arrow, slowness arrow, fire charge, and wind charge. The total amount of mobs for melee and small melee depends on which mob is picked. If it's a mob that can't wear equipment, like spiders and slimes, then there's going to be 12 mobs. If the mob can wear equipment, then it stays at 6. Your bad omen also gets converted into trial omen, which is 15 minutes per level, up to maximum of bad omen 5, which is for 1 hour and 15 minutes. Before I forget about the vault, I'll show you how the vault works. This is the loot table. We have common loot, rare loot, and unique loot. The vault ejects items in this order. Firstly, there's a 25% chance it will eject unique loot. Then it's going to eject common loot once, twice, or 3 times, and then rare loot which has a 20% chance to give common loot instead of rare loot. So if you're unlucky, you'll get common twice. Once from the common category and then the 20% chance from the rare category. And if you're very lucky, you'll get 1 unique followed by 3 common and 1 rare. So if you're looking for the trident from regular vaults or the heavy core from ominous vaults, if you don't see it as the first item ejected, then you got unlucky and have to find another vault, because it's not going to eject any more items from the unique category. I will show you an example of how I deal with trial chambers, but let me show you first how you can deal with mobs if you're not strong enough. If you have enchanted diamond armor and lots of food and potions, then you're not going to need this. But this information is pretty helpful if you get in a tough situation. We'll start with the Breeze. He's very easy to deal with alone, but if there are any other mobs present, then he is very annoying. The most dangerous part about him is the fall damage. To get the blowback advancement, do a critical hit with an axe, followed by a regular hit, then a normal hit from a stone or iron pickaxe, then punch with your hand 3 times, and finally deflect his wind charge projectile. For zombies, I pillar up 3 blocks. You can also pillar up 2 blocks, but they can sometimes hit you. For baby zombies, you can use 2 blocks. Otherwise, you won't reach them. If there's an ominous event, then I would bridge a couple of blocks to the side to avoid any incoming projectiles. For slimes, I also pillar up 3 blocks, but only if I'm low on health. Slimes in general are easy to deal with. The trial spawner also considers the mob splitting as death, so the smallest slimes don't count towards total mobs for the spawner. For regular spiders, I dig down 2 blocks, because their hitbox is too large to fit into a 1x1 space. In case of an ominous event, you dig a tunnel to avoid any projectiles. Cave spiders were tough to come up with any simple strategy, so I came up with pillaring up 3 blocks and removing the first 2. What's annoying about this strategy is you have to time when to hit the spiders, otherwise you will miss. Silverfish are kind of a joke. You can either tackle them normally, or you can place a block and shift to the very edge of the block and they won't hurt you. Weird how that works. And lastly, the mob that has the highest kill count early game, the spooky boys. What I observed is they will circle around you if they see you and come towards you if they don't see you. So placing blocks at the head level after they see you makes them go towards you and you can hit them. And here I jump so that they will notice me and jump again for a critical hit once they are close enough. If they are close, they will hit the block instead of you. Alternatively, you can rely on your shield or infighting. Here's a clip of me exploring the entrance and getting 3 advancements at the same time with the honeycomb. And using the FOV, I immediately see all 3 types of spawners, so I know I have slimes, husks, and regular skeletons. I then barricade myself to safely deal with husks because I have no armor. After those zombies are done, I destroy all the pots with a tool, because if you destroy them with your hand, the pot will drop by itself and not shatter, because shattering them doesn't clog your inventory as much, and I can reuse those bricks as building blocks because I don't have much. Now the pots can contain iron, sometimes even diamonds, but also there's a low chance that it can contain trial keys, which they're not supposed to, based on this bug report, but they do, and it's still not fixed, so I think it's fine how it is. I don't think this should be fixed. If you place a block right on the chiseled copper block, then the spawner will not see you on that side ever, so you can hide. This is my setup for the range spawner. I place 3 blocks at the bottom because sometimes the spawner can choose them to spawn in the air and they will fall down, and I deal with the spawners accordingly. Now I've got 2 trial keys, and I know I have the staircase entrance, so I return back and open those 2 vaults that are always there. Here in this corridor end, if you get an amethyst shard, you can easily craft a spyglass, like so. Break any copper block, convert that into ingots, and you can create yourself a spyglass. If you ever encounter a cave spider in one of your corridors and already finished it, then if you ever encounter it again after 30 minutes or drink an ominous bottle, you can use chain and prepare it like this. The cave spiders won't escape, and you can easily get rid of them with a critical hit from an axe. If you have space behind you, you can also back up while jumping and they won't hit you, but this is hard to do. And sometimes you can accidentally trigger a spawner, which means you have to improvise, and in my case I do the strategy that I showed with the skeletons. And if you get unlucky or do a slight mistake, then the punishment is very tough. Now finally onto the combat chambers and encounters. This is encounter 1, the staircase. It just has this staircase and a random trial spawner. This can be any trial spawner except for Breeze, and it has a vault right next to it. And that leads either to a chest or a combat chamber. And this is encounter number 2, which I like to call the Breeze jump. There's a Breeze spawner alongside with the vault. The exit is too high, and you can actually use the wind charge to get to the exit. And for some reason there's this random brick that isn't supposed to be here. Encounter number 3, which I like to call the climb, and you can use wind charges or blocks to climb all the way up, and up there is a random trial spawner. Encounter number 4, I like to call the skeleton trap, because down here are a bunch of dripstone with a vault at the bottom and a slow ranged spawner. Yes, this is the spawner that spawns skeleton every 8 seconds, and they're here to push you off the ledge. There's also a nasty trap over here with a dispenser and redstone dust. So what you can do is remove this string over here. And lastly, encounter number 5 is what I call the Breeze decoration room. It contains a lot of pots, some dispensers, and a Breeze spawner with a vault. This chamber contains a Breeze spawner in the center. If you face the staircase, then on the left side is an ominous vault. There's currently a bug where the chamber generates in such a way that the ominous vault doesn't generate. Yes, that's me, don't worry about it. In the upper section of the chamber, there are ranged spawners that sometimes generate with vaults in the wall. Every single chamber will contain a barrel with a hopper. I call them entrance hoppers, and they're here for you to either store or throw away your items. Or you can collect the hoppers if you don't want to craft them. Now in practice, I mostly ignore the Breeze spawner and immediately go to the nearest ranged spawner if there is one nearby. If there isn't, I will get rid of those Breeze because they are very annoying. A little tip: if you want to get more height, you're supposed to shift, and when you let go of shift, you're gonna press spacebar and the right mouse button at the same time. So that's your combination. Now I'm prepared to do the ominous event. Before I drink the ominous bottle, I also trap the skeletons from both sides in case they want to escape, which they can. Sometimes the Breeze can wander off here if you ignore them long enough, and you can easily defeat them here. And if you get the ominous trail key from the spawners, you can get your loot. Chamber 2 is very similar to Chamber 1, except it contains powder snow. It has a range spawner in the center, an ominous vault on the left of the stairs if you face them, and the upper section is very similar, if not the same, as Chamber 1. So immediately, when I walk into this chamber, I don't know if it's Chamber 1 or 2, and once I see the snow, I know it's Chamber 2, so only ranged spawners. Now immediately, I block this off, and block view from the center spawner, because the skeletons can actually shoot you. Now strays don't take any damage from powdered snow, regular skeletons will convert to strays and it will count as death for the trial spawner, and bogged actually die from powdered snow, so in this instance it is a much easier chamber, but if you've got strays then you have to deal with them. You can use water bucket to get rid of the powdered snow, otherwise you can use shield or the previous mentioned methods to kill the skeletons. In my case, I wait until they freeze to death. And in the case of an ominous event, you can create this ring around the skeletons to contain them in the center and kill them off. This is Chamber 4. It can contain some pots. There are always 2 small melee spawners. There's a vault at the bottom and an ominous vault above that, and another regular vault in the upper section. So here I immediately see it's baby zombies by using F5 mode and prepare myself as such with those 2 blocks, and I can fight 2 trial spawners at the same time. Also, if you're doing an ominous event, watch out for baby zombies that have swords, because their attack range is increased, so build up 3 blocks instead of 2, otherwise this will happen. Dealing with silverfish or slimes is pretty simple and straightforward. For the slimes you target the biggest one, because the smallest ones won't deal any damage to you. However, you can get overwhelmed like me in this clip. And for cave spiders, yeah, if you can't mine fast enough, then you're likely to get hit with poison. But if you're prepared, like in this clip, having blocks in the offhand and mining the blocks, it's much more easier. It's a very tedious strategy, but it just works. And during the ominous event, if you have strong enough tools, I would rather have golden apples in my hotbar. This is Chamber 8. We have 2 vaults at the bottom and 1 regular plus 1 ominous vault at the top. There are 2 ranged spawners on the highest floor, 1 in the middle and 1 at the bottom. These 4 spawners are all slow ranged spawners. When you're on this floor, even if you jump, the spawners cannot see you. So you can fight this spawner and these will not see you, unless you jump 1 block higher, if you give it time. So in practice, I built 3 blocks to go to the higher floor, and I used 2 methods, a shield strategy and a shieldless strategy. So first I'm going to show the one with the shield, and because these are slow range spawners, I trigger 1 spawner, kill the skeleton, then I trigger the second spawner, deal with the skeleton, and then go back to the first spawner, and I keep alternating between these 2 spawners until they are complete, so you don't have to wait those 8 seconds between spawns. Once I'm done with those 2 spawners, I deal with the next 2 in a similar fashion. If you don't trigger them at the same time, you're gonna have a similar strategy like the one before, in that you will alternate between the left and right spawner. And this method is all about timing your blocking with the shield and attacking at the right time. And when it comes to the shieldless version, you will deal with it like you would with a range spawner generated in the corridors. Here you also need to block where the trapdoors are, because sometimes skeletons can spawn there and can surprise you there. So if you block it off like this, then you're perfectly safe. The second spawner can be blocked the same way, although you have to use more blocks. With the last two spawners, you can trigger them at the same time and use this spawner to hide from these skeletons. Stay close to the spawner, because if you are too close to the wall, the skeletons can actually hit you. So stay close to the spawner, peek when you want them to go towards you, and you can hit their feet. If you're doing an ominous version of this, I would rather have more space to avoid the projectiles, like this. And if you've got strays, I would also replace the ice, because slippery ice is not nice. This is Eruption. It can contain skeleton spawners in the corners. And when you got these 3 bricks on the side of the bridge, and there isn't a copper bulb, then you have a melee spawner at the bottom. If there is a copper bulb, then you've got a vault. Sometimes you will have vaults over here in the open. The ominous vault is always above the breeze spawner, which always generates. In the very center, there's always a dispenser with a water bucket. You can tell by the floor design if you have a skeleton spawner or not. This is marked with oxidized cut copper. I replaced the blocks with gold for better visibility, and when you have this pattern, then you have a skeleton spawner in that corner. For corners that look like this, then you have that pattern on the floor. And these corners are very obvious. You don't have to look at the floor. So immediately, when entering the chamber, I notice the skeleton spawner and I pillar up 3 blocks. Then I place 3 blocks again to hide the spawner and place blocks at head height to have the classic setup for skeletons. For example, here, I previously wanted to deal with the skeletons, but notice there is a melee spawner and decide to deal with them first. Notice how I block the skeleton spawner from seeing me in case I accidentally trigger it. Once I'm done with the husks, I go back to the skeletons. Fighting with the breeze is easy enough, but it can be made easier by getting rid of the water bucket in the center of the room. If the breeze will activate the water, it will limit your movement. And here's an extra clip of me dealing with the spider spawners, with no armor.
This is assembly. It contains 4 regular vaults in total.
Yes, I mean spy. Anyway, there's 2 over here, 1 next to the range spawner, and last one down the stairs below the breeze spawner. The ominous vault is always located on the same wall, and these platforms and copper grates are randomly generated. Inside these 2 hallways there can be stairs, a ladder, emptiness, or a random spawner. When entering the assembly from above, you can immediately tell there's a spawner if there's a hole 3 blocks wide. In my case, it was a spider spawner. Random spawners aside, I generally run, ignoring the breeze spawner, and set up the range spawner so that if I accidentally trigger it, the skeletons won't escape. I then improvise as I go, either killing the breeze first or the skeletons. Or we can use this new strategy that I just found, is by luring the breeze over here by digging 2 blocks in this corner, they will actually follow you down here and you can take them out easily because breeze tend to jump a lot and it's really hard to hit them. So this way, by making them notice you, you can hide in this corner, and most of the time they will follow you down here. And here's an extra clip of me accidentally triggering the spawner and dealing with it afterwards. This chamber is called Slanted. It has a lot of vaults in the lower section, and it's the safest place in the chamber. Maybe the safest place on Earth, who knows. And in the upper section, there's a breeze spawner in the center, with melee or range spawners on the edges. Sometimes a melee spawner can generate in the corners of the upper section. There's vaults randomly generated in the upper section as well. Right behind the breeze spawner is an ominous vault. From what I discovered, I noticed that melee spawners usually have oxidized copper around the spawner, and the skeleton spawners or range spawners have clean and unoxidized copper, and there's always one clean block of copper on the right side in front of the skeleton spawner. Not sure if that is true, but I'll say it anyway in case it is. So in general, if I enter this chamber from below, I am looking for the side where the ominous vault is, because there are no spawners next to the ominous vault. I usually go with the method of building the trap for the mobs. So this starts by placing a block in front of the spawner so that it doesn't see me. I get rid of the cobwebs with a sword or a bucket, and then I place my setup depending on the spawner. So for the spider, I leave a 2-block gap between the spawner and place 2 blocks like this. This makes it so that the spiders won't escape. Place these 4 blocks so they won't crawl off, and once I'm done, I will uncover the spawner and deal with the spiders. For skeletons, it's easy, just place blocks at the head height. And for zombies, I create a trap where there is a 2-block hole which the zombies can fall into if you are far away enough. But if you're standing close to the hole, they will actually stay in one place and won't fall into the hole, making it easier for you to hit them. And the last spawner I deal with is the breeze, and when it's barricaded like this, it's much easier to get rid of them. And when I accidentally trigger them, I try to do the luring tactic, just like in assembly. And lastly, Pedestal is pretty tough. Just like Slanted, its bottom section is relatively safe and filled with vaults. In the center, there's a pedestal with 3 spawners, a breeze and 2 random spawners. If you look at the breeze spawner, such that it's the top left spawner, then behind it is an ominous vault. And again, similarly to Slanted, the top section can have vaults and melee spawners randomly generated. So again, if I'm at the bottom, I look at the blocks to see which mobs I'm going to deal with. And since I see skeletons, I try to set it up and improvise so I can deal with them, because they're going to jump down from above. I also have to take into consideration the silverfish that can also attack me. So I improvise by using 2 strategies at once, blocking the skeletons and using the silverfish trick. All in all, if you have the combined knowledge of how to deal with all sorts of mobs, then you will have no problem with this, but it can be tough. Sometimes the mobs can escape into other rooms and can surprise you. And here is a very special chamber I found.
What?
Turns out it was 2 random dungeons that intersected the trial chambers. Twice. And that's everything I have to say and show for trial chambers. I hope this video has been helpful for anyone that is struggling with trial chambers. If you have any questions, the most common asked questions will be in the pinned comment down below, and I will try my best to answer. If you enjoyed this video, please share it with others so more people can see this and come up with some better strategies than I did myself. And hopefully you can become a much better player than you are now. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the near future. Bye!